The first time Jack Landon saw the black spray paint dripping down his mailbox, it looked like some teenager's prank. But then he noticed the sidewalk, a red message scrawled in slanted letters right in front of his driveway. Void 7137 his address. Void. Jack stepped back. He scanned his home, a clean, well-kept property on the edge of a pine-shaded street in northern Colorado. Nothing was broken. No glass, no burglary, just that word. One word that meant nothing, or everything. He didn't, I have to guess long. Karen Lutz, the HOA's self-appointed watchdog, lived 3 doors down in a pale blue monstrosity with plastic flamingos that somehow passed her own visual integrity guidelines. She'd been after Jack for months. First, it was the color of his shutters to modern. Then it was the shed out back, unregistered structure. Even though Jack had built it under a permit she didn't even know existed. Karen was the kind of woman who cited neighbors for using non-neutral mulch, but let her own boyfriend pressure wash his truck shirtless on Sunday mornings while blasting classic rock. Jack knew what this was. The final escalation. He took a deep breath and rubbed the back of his neck. She had officially crossed a line. Because what Karen didn't know, and what Jack had never bothered to mention, was that he wasn't just some homeowner who paid his dues and stayed quiet. He was the lead structural compliance inspector for the entire county, the one who certified every address, every permit, every HOA building, including hers. The irony? Karen had just tried to erase the man who approves her entire authority. He stood quietly in the early morning light, birdsong rising above the pines. Then he pulled out his phone, snapped a picture of the graffiti, and made a call. Not to the police, not to the HOA, not to a lawyer, not to the county archives, because this wasn't going to be some angry neighbor war. This was going to be a full, cold, legal dissection, one Karen would never see coming. Jack hadn't wanted to go nuclear. He liked peace, but she hadn't left him a choice. You don't just void a man's home like some typo in a filing cabinet. You don't erase a number that legally defines a piece of the earth. Especially when the man who certified your street is the one you just tried to humiliate. By noon, that day, Jack was sitting in his office, a stack of original HOA permits and zoning maps spread across his desk. As he scanned the files, his pen began to tap, then stop, then circle one building. No permit, no permit. No zoning approval, no occupancy license. The HOA office Karen used for meetings, fines, and enforcement operations didn't legally exist. It had no history, no inspection report, no signed approvals. It was a ghost. Jack sat back, stunned but not surprised. This wasn't a war about landscaping or mailbox design anymore. This was fraud, real, documented abuse of authority. And if that was fake, what else had she filed? He stood, grabbed a fresh clipboard, and looked out over the subdivision. He didn't smile. Not yet, because what came next wouldn't just affect Karen. It would flip the entire neighborhood, and when Jack certified the final judgment, it wouldn't be her property she'd lose. It would be her power. Karen Lutz stood 5 feet 4 inches tall, but walked like she owned the whole world, or at least the cul-de-sac. Her voice could slice through silence like a hot wire, and the way she waved her HOA violation slips around, you'd think they came with the governor's seal. Neighbors called her the decor dictator. She'd fined a family for hanging wind chimes, accused another of harboring an illegal structure when their garden gnome count exceeded 3, and if your garbage bin stayed on the curb past 10 a.m., expect a warning with a photo attached. Like she ran her own surveillance unit, so when Jack Landon's address was mysteriously painted over and declared void, there was no question. It had Karen's signature all over it. Not literally. She wasn't dumb enough to sign the pavement, but everyone knew. It was her style, passive-aggressive, petty, performative. But there was one thing Karen didn't know. One fatal detail her smugness always glossed over. Jack wasn't a civilian. He was the guy who signs off on whether your property exists on a legal map, while she paraded around with HOA citations. Jack's real job came with an actual government badge issued by the county building department, with jurisdiction over zoning, permits, utilities, occupancy, and legal boundaries. In short, Jack was the one who decided if your home passed or failed the code. And Karen, she'd just picked a fight with the one person who could legally erase her. The moment Jack found that unregistered HOA office in the county records, the little shed Karen hosted all her board meetings in, he dove deeper. The more he uncovered, the more he realized Karen's paper empire had been built on sand. No permits. No inspections. No safety clearances. The clubhouse was, by every legal definition, an illegal structure. But it got worse. A second file showed the HOA's community sign. The one built with neighborhood funds had encroached 4 feet into public right-of-way. That meant it wasn't just unpermitted, it was trespassing on state-owned land. Jack made notes. Attached high-resolution satellite maps. He even logged timestamps from when Karen had held public HOA events inside that illegal clubhouse. He wasn't just building a case, he was building a timeline of lies. By the end of the day, he had 15 violations tagged, photographed, and cataloged, and not a single one belonged to him. Karen had tried to paint over his identity, but what she didn't realize was that act gave him every reason and every right to finally act. He drove home just as the sun was setting. The neighborhood quiet in that eerie early evening way. Lawns were trimmed, sprinklers ticking, porch lights blinking on. Karen was standing outside, watering her manicured shrubs, hose in hand like a scepter. Jack slowed as he pulled into his driveway. She gave a smug wave. He didn't wave back, just met her eyes, then held up a yellow folder. She squinted, trying to read it. County seal on the front, thick tab of paper inside for the first time. Her expression cracked. Jack didn't stop. He walked inside, turned on the porch light, and watched her face go pale through the blinds. That was the first tremor. The first moment she realized this wasn't going to be another letter war. This wasn't about weeds or shutters or curb paint. This was about consequences, because the man whose address she'd tried to erase wasn't just a homeowner with a grudge. He was the one who confirmed her authority in the first place. And now, he was going to take it back with evidence, not attitude. With maps, not gossip. With certified records and codebooks written in black and white. It wouldn't be a loud battle. No shouting, no social media sparring. Just slow, quiet, devastating legal fire. And when Karen finally read what was inside that folder, when she saw the county review stamped across her clubhouse, her budget, her entire HOA existence, she would understand something simple. She'd just voided the wrong address, and Jack was just getting started. The next morning, Karen Lutz woke up to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the nervous kind, that thick tension in the air when the world knows something you don't. She stepped out with her usual clipboard and scanned the neighborhood. No one waved. The kid who usually biked past her mailbox changed routes. And Carol, the sweet lady across the street who always complimented her landscaping. She turned away and shut her door as Karen approached. Something was off. Back inside, Karen's inbox lit up. Subject, urgent. HOA violations discovered, legal review underway. She opened it, blinked, read it twice. It was a formal notification from the County Compliance Division, addressed to Karen Lutz, acting president, Maple Glen HOA, referencing her direct involvement in an ongoing investigation of zoning violations, misuse of HOA funds, and operation of an unpermitted facility on HOA grounds. Attached were 13 pages of evidence, measurements, maps, timestamps, a full breakdown of bylaws she'd helped create, and and the name on the signature line, Jack Landon, senior inspector. She nearly dropped her coffee mug. Karen had painted his address, thinking she was just humiliating a neighbor. She hadn't realized she'd attacked the man whose signature she needed to even exist on paper. She wasn't dealing with another homeowner, she was dealing with the system. Meanwhile, Jack was already 3 steps ahead. He was back at County HQ, now sitting across from an internal legal review officer. On the desk between them were blueprints, overhead drone photos, and 2 manila envelopes, one labeled structural compliance, the other civil misconduct, HOA records. The officer opened the second. This says she hosted community meetings in a building without occupancy certification. Jack nodded. The structure isn't even zoned as an enclosed facility. It's a shed with air conditioning and a space heater. No permit, no safety inspection, no ADA access. They've been collecting dues to maintain something that shouldn't exist, and she's the one who vandalized your address. She or someone working for her, Jack said. She filed multiple HOA complaints against me over things that are county certified. That's falsifying enforcement. I'll testify. There was a long pause. The officer raised his eyebrows, impressed but cautious. You realize what this means? If your claims hold, she's in breach of multiple articles under the State HOA Accountability Act. I know, Jack said quietly. But I'm not stopping at Karen. I want a full audit of the HOA board, every officer, every dollar, every permit. I want these people stripped of their authority. Outside, Karen was panicking. She rushed to gather old emails, tried logging into the HOA's filing system, only to find her access had been revoked. Someone on the board had changed the passwords. Paranoia crept in. Then came the final blow, a group email from Greg Sanchez, HOA, treasurer. In light of recent complaints and official inquiry by the County Compliance Office, I am formally requesting that Karen Lutz step down as acting president while the investigation is active. I will assume interim responsibilities until further notice. Karen read it 3 times. She went pale. Greg, her ally, her lapdog, had jumped ship the moment it got hot. She rushed outside, slamming her door, still barefoot. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Some watched from porches. One even filmed. Greg, she yelled into the street. This is a setup. He's framing me. But no one responded. No one came to her defense. Because what none of them knew yet was that Jack wasn't just building a legal case. He was preparing something far bigger. Back at his home, he was finalizing a separate request. A motion to suspend the HOA charter until legal status and board Leadership could be reevaluated under state oversight, that it would dismantle the HOA and rebuild it from the ground up. Karen had tried to void one house. Now her entire kingdom was about to be declared invalid. She picked the wrong man to erase. And the best part? Jack hadn't even used his full authority yet. The inspection wasn't scheduled. Jack didn't need to schedule it. As senior county inspector, he had authority to initiate a surprise compliance audit on any community operating under public zoning or HOA authority, and Karen's was on borrowed time. So when Jack pulled into Maple Glen's cul-de-sac in a white county-marked SUV, dressed in his official vest and boots, it wasn't a social call. It was a reckoning. He stepped out with a clipboard in one hand, a small camera clipped to his chest, and a quad drone resting in the passenger seat. His badge was visible, and his stride was calm. By the time he reached the infamous HOA clubhouse, the unpermitted shed Karen had been using to command her fake empire, a small group of residents had begun to gather at the corners of their yards, whispering. Karen spotted him from her front window. Her body tensed like a statue. She stepped outside slowly, wearing that same smug expression, but it cracked when she saw the county seal on his chest. "You can't just show up uninvited," she snapped, arms folded tight. "This is private property." Jack raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting, because I was under the impression this structure is a public use facility, maintained with community funds. You've collected dues for its operation for the past 7 years. Correct?" Karen froze. "That's not the point." "No," Jack asked calmly, "because I've got aerial photos showing the shed encroaches 4 feet into utility easement, and no record of a permit, no fire inspection, not even basic foundation anchoring. So unless you've got legal documentation saying this is a privately funded building, I'll be moving forward." The drone launched with a soft hum, rising over the roof as Jack began walking the perimeter. Karen didn't speak. She knew anything she said could, and likely would be used against her. Inside the clubhouse, the mess was immediate. No ADA-compliant entryway, no ventilation. Exposed wiring dangled from one wall where a box fan had been rigged directly to an extension cord. The flooring was unfinished plywood. A stack of plastic chairs leaned in the corner beside a locked steel cabinet. Jack approached the cabinet. "Is this where you keep resident files?" he asked. Karen didn't respond. He tapped it with his boot. "You have the key?" "I'm not obligated to give you access," she muttered. "Actually, you are," he replied. "If these documents were created or used as part of HOA enforcement, they fall under public compliance records. Unless you'd prefer I request a court order and return with a locksmith." Silence. Then Karen finally relented, muttering curses as she fumbled through a keyring and opened the cabinet. What Jack found inside stopped even him cold for a moment. There were dozens of file folders, handwritten violation logs, photographs of residents' homes, not just exterior, but zoomed-in shots of backyards, through windows. Some were labeled with bizarre notes: "Unseen fence line behind shed, report next quarter. Target, Greg S. Grass length 1.7 inches off. Remove Christmas lights 48 hours early. Preempt infraction." It wasn't enforcement. With surveillance. Jack began to flip faster. Some of the documents showed altered dates on violation notices, backdated to make fake warnings seem legitimate. Others had receipts for purchases made with HOA funds, restaurant dinners, spa visits, even an Amazon receipt for a personal drone, paid for by the community. "You used community funds for this?" Jack asked, keeping his tone steady. "I logged them under discretionary board expenses," Karen said flatly, realizing too late how damning that sounded. Jack photographed every folder, every receipt, every note, and then he found it near the back, a printed photo, his own mailbox. Taken the day before the void, 7137 was painted. Karen had documented it, labeled it. She'd planned it. "That's attempted intimidation using HOA authority," he said, slipping the photo into an evidence sleeve, "and it just became a criminal matter." Karen stood stiff. The neighborhood was watching now, people edging closer, phones out, whispering. Someone gasped. Others began talking, loud enough for Karen to hear. Jack turned to face her, slow and deliberate. "You tried to void my home, Karen, but the only thing that's about to be invalid is your entire organization." And with that, he sealed the evidence folder, returned to his SUV, and drove away. Not in anger, but with certainty. Karen stood in the middle of her little empire, now exposed for the hollow kingdom it was. And what was coming next? Wasn't a fine, wasn't a warning, that was prosecution. 3 days passed. The HOA office, once Karen's private fiefdom, sat locked, yellow county tape fluttering in the breeze like a warning flag. Residents avoided it. Kids whispered stories about the secret files, and Karen, she hadn't been seen since the inspection. Until Thursday evening. She walked into the emergency HOA meeting like nothing was wrong, dressed in her usual pastel sweater, lips pursed, clipboard underarm, as if the entire neighborhood wasn't one signature away from filing a class action suit against her. But this meeting wasn't hers to run. It was Greg Sanchez, the treasurer, who now stood at the head of the clubhouse courtyard, surrounded by residents and 2 folding tables covered in printouts. Jack stood quietly off to the side, not speaking. He didn't need to. His presence alone made Karen look like a moth cornered by fire. Greg cleared his throat. Tonight, I'm releasing the findings of the compliance inspection led by Mr. Landon and submitted to the county compliance office. These are not opinions. These are facts, backed by county records, signed documents, and property maps. He held up a printed photo. Violation number 1. HOA headquarters, built without zoning permits. Violation number 2. Community funds used for expenses. Violation number 3. Surveillance of residents, including minors, without consent or purpose. People gasped. One woman covered her mouth. A man from the back shouted, "What the hell were you doing, Karen?" Karen's voice cracked as she tried to hold control. "You're all being manipulated. Jack has it out for me. This is personal." Greg cut her off, then explained the receipts. Spa treatments on the HOA card. Drone surveillance. Fines filed against people who didn't violate anything. She went silent. Then Jack stepped forward for the first time. He opened his folder and handed out 10 copies of an email printout. "Here's something else," Jack said calmly. "Emails from Karen to a board member, pressuring them to backdate fines so she could justify liens. This isn't just a bad policy, it's fraud." That's when Tina Morris, the board secretary, stood up. "I have something to say," she said, nervous, her voice barely audible. "I helped her." All eyes turned to her. "I filed fake warnings. I forged 3 neighbor signatures on vote sheets. Karen told me it was temporary, that it was just to get problem residents under control, I thought. I thought it was harmless." Karen's eyes widened. "You said you deleted those." Tina shook her head. "I backed them up, and I'm turning them over to the county." The air snapped with tension. Karen's mouth moved, but no words came. Greg stepped forward again. "In light of these confessions and the ongoing investigation, I'm calling for a vote of no confidence, effective immediately. Karen Lutz is removed as acting HOA president and is banned from holding any board position. Pending legal outcome." Hands shot up. "Every single one." Karen. She didn't even vote. She just stood there, stunned, surrounded by former followers now standing shoulder to shoulder against her. But just as it seemed like the storm was over, something shifted in Jack's expression. He opened his briefcase again. "I said I found 13 violations," he said. "But that was before I got the drone footage from the community lot behind Karen's home." He clicked a remote. A projector screen behind Greg flickered to life. Aerial footage played. From above, they saw what looked like a storage tent, camouflaged, tucked into overgrowth. Inside, stacks of HOA files, boxers, old lawn signs, political campaign posters, even people's personal property, a pile of unopened letters. Fines never delivered, applications denied without review. Karen had been running a shadow archive, hiding anything that didn't serve her narrative. Her voiding Jack's address, just one in a long string of acts meant to erase residents she didn't like. People weren't just shocked, they were furious. "You stole my sign," one man shouted. "You denied my fence 3 times. Yelled another. "I applied for a permit to repaint, and you said you never got it." A woman shouted from the back. It wasn't just a crime anymore, it was theft. It was suppression. It was a cover-up. Karen's mask finally shattered. She turned, trying to leave, but found herself boxed in by neighbors, people who had been silent for years. Now united. Jack didn't stop her. He didn't have to, because Karen wasn't going home. A sheriff's deputy stepped forward, gently but firmly stopping her at the edge of the crowd. "We've received complaints," he said. "A copy of your personal file logs. We'll need you to come with us for questioning." Karen didn't argue. Couldn't she just look at Jack, the man whose mailbox she'd tried to erase, as if seeing him for the first time? She wasn't in charge anymore. Karen Lutz wasn't in jail, not yet, but her name was printed across the top of 4 active complaints now moving through the county's legal system: misuse of HOA funds, falsification of resident records, harassment, and something no one expected, fraudulent tax filings. The storage tent Jack's drone uncovered behind Karen's property had been stuffed with more than just yard signs and fake notices. Mixed into the boxers were records, real ones, showing that Karen had been double reporting maintenance costs and rerouting the difference into a secondary HOA account. It looked official. Same logo, same letterhead, but it was a ghost account created under a shadow company that Jack traced back to a closed P.O. box registered to Karen's ex-husband, who'd been handling the landscaping for 5 years without ever touching a lawnmower. It wasn't petty fines anymore, it was embezzlement. Greg, the treasurer, looked like he'd aged 10 years as he sat across from Jack in the new board office, this time inside the community's actual approved building, a facility. Jack had just recertified himself. "We trusted her," Greg muttered. "We let her write the budget. All I ever did was sign off." "You signed blank checks," Jack replied. "Legally, that makes you liable, but I'll note your cooperation." Greg nodded, defeated. By now, Karen had retained an attorney and gone silent. She wasn't answering emails, wasn't showing her face in public, and her house had gone dark. Shutters closed. Porch light off. but Jack still wasn't done, because there was one violation that still didn't make sense. The HOA shed, the one Karen had operated out of 4 years, had a separate power line, unregistered and drawing a second charge to a residential meter that didn't belong to her lot. It took days of digging, but Jack finally followed the circuit to an empty parcel just outside HOA boundaries. A tiny, undeveloped sliver of land listed under a shell corporation called Pine Ridge Holdings, the only name tied to that LLC. Karen Lutz, she hadn't just committed fraud. She'd literally built an empire off the books using the HOA as her front. That shed had been powered illegally, sitting on the edge of stolen easement space, and propped up by community dues. Jack printed it all, bound it in a report, sent it to the district attorney and the state housing bureau with one final recommendation: suspend Maple Glen HOA's charter, initiate receivership, begin immediate audit and dissolution proceedings if fraud is confirmed. The message was clear. This wasn't just about one person's corruption. The system had allowed it. The board had ignored it. The charter had no safeguards. It needed to be torn down and rebuilt. That night, a town hall meeting was called. Jack stood before over 50 residents, some furious, others stunned, all of them hungry for answers. He didn't sugarcoat anything. For years, he said, you were governed by a fraud. Your fines, your dues, weaponized. Your permits, buried. Your voices, erased. That ends now. He pointed to the projector where documentation flicked past like a slow-motion car crash. Duplicate invoices, shell company reports, forged signatures, photos of Karen's private stash. You weren't part of a community. You were funding her lifestyle. There was no anger in Jack's voice, only purpose. Going forward, he said, you'll vote on whether to dissolve this HOA entirely and form a legal neighborhood council. No enforcement powers, no fines, no threats, just community, governed by residents, certified by the county. I'll help build it. People clapped. Some cheered. Others just nodded, as if waking up from a long nightmare. But before the meeting closed, a quiet voice rose from the back. Tina Morris, the former board secretary. I found something else, she said. Jack turned. Tina stepped forward, holding an envelope. It was buried inside Karen's file cabinet, taped underneath a drawer. She opened it. Inside was a forged building permit marked with Jack's digital signature, used by Karen to justify the original construction of the clubhouse. Jack froze. That was his name, his seal, his license ID, but he'd never signed it. Karen had faked his credentials. It wasn't just fraud. It was identity manipulation, a felony. Jack took the paper, examined it. His jaw clenched, not from anger, but precision. This changes everything, he said. Because now Karen wasn't just in trouble with the county. She was under state criminal review. Jack sat at his kitchen table with the forged permit in front of him, lit only by the dim light above. The fake signature stared back at him, his name, his seal, copied with just enough accuracy to fool a county clerk, but not the man who issued it. Karen Lutz hadn't just used her position to bully neighbors. She had impersonated a government official that crossed the line from civil misconduct to full-blown felony. He opened his laptop, drafted the letter, labeled the attachments. The email was addressed to 3 departments: County Compliance, State Board of Professional Licensing, and the District Attorney's White-Collar Crime Unit. Subject: evidence of permit forgery and criminal fraud. Maple Glen HOA. He hovered over send. And clicked. By sunrise, Karen's file was in the hands of people who did not mess around. Her silence would no longer be a shield. It would become a confession. But Jack wasn't finished just yet, because Maple Glen wasn't just broken. It was leaderless, and residents were still vulnerable. And if there was one thing Jack had learned about HOA systems, it was this: they only change when someone who knows the rules rewrites them. So, when Greg and the remaining board members asked if Jack would consider helping restructure the HOA under temporary guidance, he gave them a different idea. He handed them a proposal. Simple, sharp, legally clean. Dissolve the HOA, he said. Start fresh. Create a council with no punitive authority, community-based, all decisions transparent, no dues unless approved, no fines without independent review. And one more thing. He tapped the bottom of the page. All activity certified through the county compliance office. Through me. The room went quiet. Jack didn't want power. He wanted to end abuse. They voted unanimously, and just like that, the HOA Karen built with its fake laws, shady fines, and neighborhood surveillance was erased. In its place stood the Maple Glen Community Advisory Council, a mouthful of a name with no enforcement teeth, but a spine of steel behind it. The very next day, Karen's mailbox vanished, not vandalized, not smashed, removed, by order of the county. Because her property, according to updated maps and zoning inspections, now sat 4 feet over the legal lot line, she'd added an extension without permission, and Jack, he'd signed the correction. Notice himself, poetic, precise, and permanent, by the end of the week. The council held its first official meeting outdoors, unfolding chairs, no clubhouse, no hierarchy. Jack stood off to the side, sipping coffee while Emily, his wife, ran the meeting. She had a calm confidence to her voice that carried more power than Karen's shrieking ever had. Emily wasn't interested in punishing people. She wanted gardens approved, potholes filled, and peace restored. She was elected council chair in 15 minutes flat. Meanwhile, Karen faced a bigger courtroom. The county charges alone were enough to damage her for years: misappropriation of funds, abuse of authority, and forgery. But when the state charges landed, she was formally indicted under the Colorado Official Fraud Act, facing potential prison time for impersonating a government official and submitting falsified permits for financial gain. Her attorney pleaded for settlement, but the DA wasn't interested in cutting her a deal. Not after the depth of the evidence. Jack submitted every file, every receipt, every photo cataloged and time-stamped with clinical perfection. Karen's kingdom had not just fallen, it had never legally existed, but the final twist came quietly. 1 week later, Jack received a certified envelope. Inside, a notice from the county confirming that the land Karen's illegal clubhouse sat on was no longer recognized as a compliant structure. It was marked for demolition. Jack stood on the sidewalk the day it happened. No ceremony, no announcement, just a truck, a crew, and a wrecking claw that ripped Karen's shed down in under 20 minutes. He watched as it collapsed, the symbol of years of fear and manipulation, into a pile of scrap and fake authority. One of the crewmen looked over. "Want the honors, sir?" he asked, handing Jack the demolition form. Jack signed it without a word. Certified. As the dust settled, Jack turned to leave, but the camera wasn't done rolling. The dust from the demolition hadn't even settled when word began to spread beyond the subdivision. What happened in Maple Glen? The HOA take down the forensic inspection. The exposure of a corrupt president made local news. Then it hit a real estate blog. Then a countywide HOA watch group posted the full report. And then the emails came from homeowners in other neighborhoods, from whistleblowers on other HOA boards, from real estate lawyers, even inspectors across state lines. Jack Landon had gone from a quiet senior inspector to something else entirely, a symbol, a man who had used the very system others feared to fight back against it. But Jack didn't care about headlines. He cared about results. And the best result of all, Maple Glen was finally free. No more bogus fines, no more clipboard threats, no more Karen. The newly formed community council met every month in the open-air lot near the Central Park. No clubhouse, no locked doors. Residents could bring their dogs, their kids, even beer. They solved things the old-fashioned way, by actually talking to each other. Jack had been asked to run for council chair more than once. He declined every time. His wife, Emily, was better at it, kinder, patient, and if Karen had taught the neighborhood anything, it was that power should never live in the hands of the person who wants it most. Jack stayed in the background. The county assigned him to a new district, but every once in a while, he drove back through Maple Glen, just to see it, just to remember what it looked like when people stood up, not with rage, but with records, with truth. One afternoon, months after the demolition, Jack received a letter in the mail. No return address, no stamp, just a handwritten note. Inside was a single photo, his mailbox. Clean, freshly painted, no graffiti, no scrawled threats, just the number, 7137, underneath, in shaky writing, "I'm sorry, I see it now, K." He didn't frame it, didn't burn it. He just tucked it away in the same drawer where he kept his inspection badge. A reminder that sometimes, the people who shout the loudest are the ones holding on by a thread. Karen Lutz eventually settled out of court. She avoided prison barely, but was fined, banned from HOA involvement for life, and barred from holding any nonprofit leadership role in the state of Colorado. Her house went up for sale within the year. No one threw eggs. No one celebrated. Maple Glen simply moved on. But the final twist? It came the following spring. Jack received an official letter from the state licensing authority. They were launching a new department, Residential Oversight and Abuse Prevention Unit, a team dedicated to auditing and protecting residents from rogue HOAs with Jack listed as lead advisor. He smiled, because the number Karen tried to erase was now printed at the top of the state's newest watchdog office, 7137, code for verified residential lead. Jack didn't need revenge. He had certification. And for anyone watching who's ever felt silenced by an HOA, here's the truth. There's power in documentation. There's strength in knowing the rules, and there's nothing more dangerous to corruption than someone who knows exactly where the lines are drawn. So don't let them paint you out. Stand your ground. Find the truth. And remember, every community deserves a voice. Just make sure yours can't be voided. Subscribe for more stories where the tables turn, the bad guys fall, and the quiet ones fight back with proof. Because sometimes, the pen isn't just mightier than the sword, it's stronger than the